that Jesus spent a lot of his time restoring people's sight. It's very critical. People who are blind have a shorter lifespan because they're not able to move about, get the exercise that they need, and other things like that. So having eyesight is so precious. And Malinga's work is to restore people's sight. And this is him here. Now, when the church first went, the Islamic country, when the church first approached the government says, "Oh, you Christians want to help Muslims? Sure, you can help us." And they placed the church, they placed the clinic, they said, "You can have this lot of land," placed right in the middle of the worst slum in there. Now, one thing, Djibouti has one thing that the other countries surrounding it does not have, and that's peace. So lots of refugees flood from Somalia, from conflict in Ethiopia, Eritrea, from Yemen, all these other countries, they flood to Somalia for safety. Overwhelm the country. And here in the worst slum, 30,000 people in the slum with no running water, no electricity, no sewer system. And they say, "Here, you Adventists can operate your clinic here." After a while, the government began to recognize that the best treatment coming in the country was coming out of this clinic. And the government officials and the aristocrats, they were coming to our clinic for treatment, but they were embarrassed to go to a slum to get treatment, and the stench around and everything else. So they asked us, while I was there, they asked if we would relocate our clinic to the better side of town. And we always wanted, when the church first went in the early 90s, the church always preferred that it could make an impact on the country by serving those who were well-to-do. And they would pay, and that would help the church be able to help the poor. But now, with the clinic there in the slum, got established, invested money to build the clinic and equip it. But now the government's asking the church to move the clinic to a nice location. And when we were there, we said, "Well, we really want to help the poor, and we really don't have room to, relocate. We don't have the means to relocate the clinic." So they said, "No problem. Operate 2 clinics. You can keep your clinic here, but open another one on the better side of town." So I said, "Well, we really don't have the money to operate 2 clinics. That means we're going to get additional doctors and other things." So what they did, they bulldozed a lot of the slum area, and they built a nice, and the road was still under construction, they built a nice freeway right up to the door of our clinic so that they could drive in their Lexus and their Mercedes-Benz and come to our clinic and other things like that. And it was under construction when I left, and this is some pictures there. So what the church did, they decided to, because we normally operated 6 days a week, to operate the clinic at its current location 4 days, and where the people were displaced, to load up our truck and carry our services to the new location where the refugees were sent. And there the government allowed us to have a building, and this is at the new refugee center, and you see all the crowds that normally flood our clinic. The night watchman, who watches carefully and monitors the crowd, watches the equipment, makes sure nothing gets stirred, and was once totally blind himself until Malinga had worked on him. Now he has 20/20 vision, better than mine. He doesn't even wear glasses. This is in the clinic. All of his technical staff and his technical assistants had no more than a high school education, and they were personally trained by him also. All those who deal with the anesthesia and everything else were all no more than a high school, just high school graduates, probably not even finished high school, but they were all personally trained by himself. And this is in the recovery room at one of the places, and this is Malinga doing his work on a person. And later giving an injection, I think re-inflating an eye that was operated on. And also we had a dental Okay, yes, Abba, Malinga, yes, Abba, and what's it, Zany, and right, Zany Cornelia. Yeah, they were our dental, and, yes, they were our dental surgeon here. These are Muslim women. Now, they are Adventists in their heart. They cannot openly profess, but they keep the Sabbath. They don't do work on the Sabbath. They put aside their tithe. They're looking forward to the second coming of Isa. Isa in Arabic is Jesus. And during the time I was there, they come from Muslim families. The husbands are Muslims. They've had an influence on their husbands. In the mornings, we would get together for worship and read the Desire of Ages. Those ladies are the first one there. The Muslims are the first ones there because they're so impressed with the book Desire of Ages and the life of Christ and others. So you're going to see many of them in the kingdom. And here's now, it's very interesting. Now, in the Middle East, the weekend is Friday, the prayer day, and Saturday. Sundays, the schools are open, banks are open, businesses are open. The major foreign exchange is the oil docks. There's oil tankers that come from Saudi Arabia. Their final stop before hitting the Indian Ocean, that vast body of water, is to refuel in Djibouti. That's where they refuel. And before going, they get their last land rest before making that long trek across the Indian Ocean. Conversion is restricted. You don't find Christian churches much there in Djibouti. And because the weekend is Friday and Saturday, you don't have Sunday services. Because people have to be, and the expatriates that work on the oil docks, they have to be at work on Sundays. So the only church that's operating is the Adventist church. And that's at our clinic. And this is our chaplain. Chaplain, and we have like an all-nations church. Expatriates and Christians from all denominations, if they're going to worship, it's going to be in our church on Saturdays. And the government allows it because they don't want to lose the clinic. Because they feel that if they enforce their religious restrictions on us, we will pack up and leave, and they don't want that to happen. So you can operate your church, no problem. And so folk come, and this is our deaconesses, baptismal candidates, baptism there in the Red Sea. Where otherwise it would have been restricted. Communion service. Now we're not fools. You know, we're not fools. We did accept the government's offer for that nice piece of land that they promised. But instead of building a clinic, we needed a place to house doctors and those we were able to bring in from the West. So we built 4 quarters and units here, which 1, 2, 3, 4. And the bottom is designed in a way so that we can easily convert it into a clinic at some time in the future that we can afford to do it. So the walls are movable, all the drainage system is in place so that we can operate a clinic at some point in the future. And so this is just a little idea. This is the Prime Minister of the country, and this is your cousin. And a few of us, they're meeting the Prime Minister of the country who is asking us to do more. Said, please do more in our country. And so they wanted us to bring ADRA. They heard of what ADRA was doing in different parts of the world. So they say, introduce ADRA here. And also they said, we want you to open up an English language school for students. So we said, okay, that's fine. We would start an English school so that your children can learn English and other things. We can start a grade school for children. No, not for children, for us. We want to learn English. So we have an English language school there also. Now, as I mentioned, the largest base on the entire continent of Africa is in Djibouti. Just recently, this past week, they made strikes in Somalia, Mogadishu, and also they protect the the oil tankers bringing oil from Saudi Arabia through the Strait of Aden out to the Indian Ocean and through to the west. And they have about 5,000 servicemen there in Djibouti. And the servicemen are so impressed with the Adventist clinic. They say, you Adventists are doing such a good work here in Africa. Say, we're taught to fight. We're an expeditionary force, but you know how to bring life. Said, anything you need, tell us, and we will give to you. And so these are servicemen from the base there. But not only that, but, okay, this is our little church group. But not only that, is that recently they requested a Seventh-day Adventist chaplain to be the head chaplain of the base in Djibouti. And Washington Johnson had served a year at the request of the United States Navy's combined Navy and Air Force. That because of the work of our clinic, the United States Armed Forces said we want a Seventh-day Adventist chaplain to serve in our base, to serve the 5,000 men and women there. So it just goes to show what the Lord is doing in different parts of the world. Now, let me just jump over. You said something about the medical work, and we talked about healing in our Sabbath school. I'm going to see if I can just jump to one thing that impressed me. I was recently in China, also in Korea, but I'm going to skip through very quick because I know it's getting close to lunchtime and I'm beginning to feel a little hungry myself. So let me just jump over real quickly. I want to get, this is some shots taken in China, but I want to get past, okay, this is where I want to go. Okay, here's a graveyard in Seoul, Korea. This graveyard is maintained by the Korean government, and it's in honor for those who brought religion to Korea. And in this graveyard, in this grave site, this burial ground are 3 Seventh-day Adventist missionaries. And let me just go through. These are of different denominations, Catholics, and several others. But this is George, and I guess I can see it from here. This is the graveyard, the gravestone of George Root, and then his wife, May Ann Root. Now, George and May graduated from Emmanuel Medical School. I think it was formerly Loma Linda. They graduated back in the mid-1800s, later 1800s, on a Sunday morning. It was at around, I think the graduation was 10 o'clock that morning. 3 o'clock that afternoon, they got married, and by 6 o'clock that evening, they went on a long boat to Korea. He graduated as a medical doctor, she was a nurse. They thought that when they got married, they would like to take the gospel to a country where Adventism was not yet established. And so they selected Korea, South Korea, to take the gospel to a country where there were no Christians or stuff like that. After about 3 years, May got sick and died. And so he continued his work. He started, just to read his gravestone, it says, "I did not come to Korea as a tourist. I came to this land to give my whole body, even my bones, to be buried. If a wolf attacks Koreans, I will not run away as hired shepherds would do. Rather, I am a missionary who would give his life for his sheep. I have never treated any patient lightly. I have done my best to treat each patient, whether it was the president or a poor farmer's wife." He eventually became the personal physician to the emperor of the country, the president of the country. And just to share with you his life. Okay, here it says how he started a hospital and his wife came, she got sick. He started a hospital, he eventually returned back to the United States, remarried, and then brought his new wife back and during the Korean War, I think during the First World War, he had an 8-bed hospital. He started an 8-bed hospital. During the Korean War, he operated a 32-bed hospital in an airplane hangar. And there, eventually, what started as just to make a long story short, what started as a very small 8-bed hospital, this is it today. It is the most prominent hospital in Korea. Matter of fact, if any Korean wants to get his U.S. green card or citizenship, the embassy refers them to our Adventist hospital for treatment. And it just goes to show that this is the medical director in the white coat, and then the business manager, and there I'm taking a picture with a very large, prominent hospital. So it just goes to show from a small 8-bed hospital and a vision. And we're talking about centers of influence. Just a small vision, it has mushroomed, and you can see how the Lord has blessed them all. And so we can thank the Lord. But also impressive to me was this part of the graveyard that were dedicated to missionary children. Now, this is the graveyard for children of missionaries who died while their parents were in service. And I could not help but think that these children probably would have grown to full adulthood and old age if they had access to the immunizations and the medication available to children in their own home country. But because they were in a remote or in a poor country at that time, they died from diseases which in this part of the world were preventable. But their reward will be just as great as that of their parents. And if there's anywhere I would rather be during that great getting up morning when the road is called up yonder and the Lord calls forth the righteous dead, this is where I would like to be. When these children are reunited with their parents. You know, some of them were infants, some were toddlers, some were, teenagers, young children, but gave their life, but yet in heaven a reward is listed even beside their names, even though they had no choice in the matter. Okay, I've got 4 minutes to just give you an overview. Now I'm going to move away from this, and yeah, we're not going to go there. Have you enjoyed it so far? Yeah. Okay, lovely. I'm just going to briefly, in 4 minutes, give you a message that normally would take me 45 minutes. And we're talking about God's church. And I've entitled it, Christ's Bride and the Devil's Girlfriend. Christ's Bride and the Devil's Girlfriend. Talking about this church that God is going to bring to a great conclusion. We've looked at his church. And with a wife, there's a commitment. There's security. There's a legal contract. Binding in the courts of Virginia, binding in the courts of heaven. And I'm talking about the ideal now. But with a girlfriend, that's not the case. With a girlfriend, there can be a relationship, there can be an affection, but there is no security, no commitment, no legally binding contract. If a man wants to leave, he can do so whenever he desires or whenever she desires. And this is the type of relationship that Satan has with those who place themselves under his control. He will use you, abuse you, they'll abandon you. But with Christ, it's different. He says, those who want to have a marital relationship with me, he says, I will never leave thee. Hebrews says, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. And Matthew 28:20 says, lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the age. And if you are tempted to feel alone, Isaiah 41:10 says, lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the age. And having an affair with Satan at first fascinates, then he assassinates. He thrills and then kills. But Jesus says, I will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on him, in Isaiah 26.
Amen.
Now, a woman in prophecy represents a church. When you look in prophecy, when you look at a corrupt woman, represents the corrupt church, and you can see that in Ezekiel chapter 23, verses 2 and 4. And then you find the pure woman of Revelation 19, verses 7 and 8. And so we have a woman in prophecy represents a church. Corrupt woman represents the apostate churches. A pure woman represents God's true church.